So today I'm going to take us back 8 years. Can you believe it? Yes, we are going back 8 years because there was a recent tragedy where a man was stabbed and killed inside a church. And I was doing research on this case and I found one 8 years old, which was almost identical. It was scary how identical it was. And in researching this historic case, there was so much learning that I got from it. I was like, I've got to share this one with you guys. So we're going to focus our conversation today on a case study which happened in 2015. This was at a rural church 50 miles east of Baltimore, where a man was stabbed inside the church. He was tragically killed and his wife was seriously injured. And like I said, there is so much learning from the story. So I'm going to take us to some of the historic news reports. Then I'm going to break down what it is that they say. So let's go to the first news report now.
45 this evening, we received a call from the Anna Prayer Mountain Church in Urbana, a call for a stabbing. It was about 7:45. As we responded there minutes later, we found that there were two victims. One adult male deceased at this point. One adult female has been flown out, critical condition, and we do have a suspect in custody. My understanding is it is a Korean church organization. Suspect in custody is a 30-year-old adult male, Asian descent, from Northern Virginia, showed up in the area about a week ago. My understanding is he was living at the church. Other than that, I don't have any idea about any relationship between the victims and the suspect.
So did you hear the first couple of points? And I'm going to play the second video and we're going to come back to that. But this male who was the assailant had turned up at the church about a week before the attack, and it was believed that he was living at the church. So hold on to those 2 points. He recently turned up to the church, and it's believed that he was living there overnight. So let's go to a second video. I'm going to break this down.
Miles from that church. It's so remote, so deep down into the woods on a dirt road that we couldn't even get a television broadcast signal out of there. So now we're standing in this farm field. Now the name of the church is the Anna Prayer Mountain Church here in Urbana. Deputies say a man came here last night for during church services and stabbed a married couple. The man died on the scene. The woman was flown to shock trauma. Now this is where it gets even more bizarre. The suspect called 911 himself, and he told deputies what he did and then said he would wait for them to come get him. When police or deputies got there, the man surrendered peacefully, and when police finally made it deep down into those woods and down the dirt road and across the pond there, they say this is what they found.
So what a strange story. So we heard in that second news report that the assailant actually called 911. So we know he recently attended the church. We know that he was staying there overnight, and he was the person that called 911 after he killed someone. And the news report goes on to say that he stayed and waited until detectives arrived. So something interesting here, because this case is 8 years old, we can sort of dissect it a little bit more. But when the person was found guilty, what he actually said was his motivation was that, I'm going to read this for you here now. He said, according to a charging document, Kim, who is the assailant, said he was tired of being treated badly and disrespected by Koreans. So there's a race motivation there. And he said the male victim had treated him badly on the day of the stabbing. He also told authorities that the male victim's wife had gotten in the way while trying to defend her husband, so he ended up stabbing her too. What a tragic, tragic story. And like I said, I stumbled across this when I was researching a modern day murder inside a church by knife, and the similarities were very striking. So I want to take us through a couple of interesting things that I observed from this case. So firstly, and I'm now a British American, so I don't know all the history behind this, but I think it was Ronald Reagan that said around the Russians. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know people love to do that. Put a comment below if I've got it wrong, but was it Ronald Reagan that said, with the Russians, trust but verify? This man had been sleeping at the church. He had recently appeared. Were any questions asked at the time surrounding who was he, why was he here, and was it the right thing for him to do to be sleeping at the church? There was clearly, looking back at this now, there was clearly some mental illness in there. So great observation. He'd been sleeping at the church. even though we're a house of worship, we have to trust but verify. And it is challenging. It is hard, right? The reason being that we are ministry. We're ministry focused. I call this security ministry. We want to make sure that people are welcome to our church. If they are down on the luck, we want to help them. But at the same time, the Lord would call us to trust but verify and make sure we know who they are. We have the pleasure of hindsight to look back on this because there was clearly some mental illness involved. So that's the first point I want to make, that the man had been sleeping at a church. Trust but verify who he was. The other interesting piece of information in this story is that he showed up about a week before the attack. Now, if you've gone for any of my courses, I teach conversational interviewing. The who, the what, the where, the why, the how. Why was he here? How did he get here? What made him show up at a church? How did he choose that particular church? Why did he choose to target that church? All these 5 WH questions. Someone showed up about a week before. Remember, the second news reader, no, not news reader, sorry, the second newscaster, whatever we call them, reporter, I'm losing my train of thought here now. The second reporter said that they were in such a remote area, they couldn't record because they couldn't get a signal. They had to go. He said he was stood in some field somewhere. So he showed up about a week before to a remote church. What took him there? Do not forget to ask the who, what, when, where, why, and how questions. Be inquisitive. I think Walt Whitman said, be inquisitive, not judgmental. Find out why this person's here. As you're trying to find their faith journey, what brings them to your church, be inquisitive and find out those details. Again, we have the hindsight to look back on this case, but this is someone who turned up around a week before he took someone's life. What took him to this small rural church, which was down a country lane that you wouldn't necessarily stumble across? How did he get to that church? Another interesting piece. The next one that I want to focus on, I just briefly touched on this, is the reporter. I've got it right now. The reporter said that they were down a remote lane and they had no signal. So this was 2015. Let's fast forward to where we are today. If we know that, is that something that we need to take action on? If we know that we're in a rural church, and maybe you're watching this video, you're in a rural church. If we're in a rural church and we know we have poor signal, what are we doing to try and rectify that problem? Are we using radios? Are we using our cell phones? If we know there is no signal, mass communication, how are we going to communicate with emergency services, with each other in a crisis? And I don't necessarily have an answer for you. There's so many products out there, mass notification. There's a great product called AlertCom by Alert Protection Services here in Minnesota, where I am. Definitely check that out. It's called AlertCom by Alert Protection Services. Mass notification on your phone, on the app. But we've got to be thinking, have we not, in today's world, how are we going to communicate in an emergency? If we know we're in a rural area, if you're watching this video and you are rural, you have poor signal. There's not necessarily an answer I can give you other than, again, be inquisitive and work out how are we going to resolve that, because in an emergency, we need to respond quickly. And if we don't have good communication, we cannot do that. So again, check out Alert Protection Services. They have a product called AlertCom, which is a mass notification app. Definitely check that out. And then the last comment that I want to make watching this is it was a rural church down a country lane where no one really expected this to happen. Obviously, this is 2015, but it did. And tragically, a man lost his wife. A man lost his life. His wife was seriously injured. How would you respond to that medical situation if it were to occur at your church? And I spoke to a nonprofit today when we were talking about the medical response, and they had Band-Aids in their first aid box. They had ice packs. But I was asking them about what about today's modern issues that we have with medicals? Where is your AED? Where is your Narcan for opioid abuse? Where are your tourniquets? Where are your pack the wound things that you are going to need in that medical emergency? And it wasn't that they were doing necessarily anything wrong. They just needed their eyes open into the world has changed And in those first few moments, what are you going to do to keep people safe? So there's a lot of learning in this case as to where we are now. And I hope that in some way you'll have responses to what would this look like at your church if it happened today? What medical equipment do you have to help try and keep that man alive? If you don't have anything, please go and do some research, look online and find out what should we have inside our church for the modern day threats, knowing that people could be seriously injured, there could be mass casualties. Do we have everything that we need? So again, I just wanted to talk about this story because it was fascinating to me when I was researching a stabbing at a church which occurred only a couple of days ago. I stumbled across this case from 2015 and thought there's a lot of complexities in here. Lack of mass notification, rural area, medical response. Someone recently attended the church, had been sleeping there, trust but verify. There was a lot that was packed in there, so some great learning to consider this. What would that look like in our church? How do we lead people in a Christ-like way, but at the same time verify who they are by asking the right questions? Who, what, where, when, why, how? Be inquisitive, not judgmental, as Walt Whitman once said. So those are my views and opinions. I would love your comments. Please drop a comment below wherever you are listening. But for now, you stay safe. You have a blessed day. My name is Simon Osmo, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.